By itself, young men. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I am Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted to be joined by James McKenzie and Patrick McGilp for 1 hour of Celtic chat. I'm joined by the rising stars of Celtic media, James and Patrick. Combine their ages, and you're probably still younger than me, guys. Patrick, you got your ticket for the weekend?
I do. I got an email yesterday while I was in work. Got in the sort of first ballot a few weeks ago, and it came through in the app yesterday. So really excited. You know, it's not the best stadium. It's nowhere near the quality of Celtic Park, Hampden, but I'm quite far back on the east stand, sort of near the corner flag. So excited for the day. I think the good weather's going to pass by the time Saturday comes around. But you know, the game should be entertaining. You know, we're in a good bit of form. Maybe struggled a wee bit at the weekend there, but apart from that, we're in a pretty good vein of form, and our opponents are really struggling at the moment. So I'm looking forward to it. It's not often you get to count down to a possible treble securing Scottish Cup final. So you've got to savour these moments because you don't know when they might come around again. Hopefully next season, but you know, you've got to really savour these moments because they are special.
They absolutely are. And, you know, I say that I'm joined by two of the young team, which I am, and you are used to success. But what I would also say is that's just the way it is. You were born into that, and that's fine. And we talk about a culture, James, a football club, a culture that is kind of embedded by guys like Callum McGregor, Jamesy Forrest, et al. But there's also a culture among the fan base, I think, through the success. And I don't see it as elitism. It's almost as if this is our demands now. We're very demanding as a fan base, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you look at the position the club is in. The club has been run very well over the last 20 years. We've had no real major issues. We've signed well the last few years. We've turned over profit year after year after year. We've got an incredibly strong playing squad there as well. And the man in the tagline is the man that's really helped change a lot of the culture around the club amongst some other figures as well, where people like me, people like Patrick, who are born into this generation, we only know success. A lot of the fans will go into a season expecting a treble. That's the expectation these days. I remember Brendan's first season, he comes in, he loses out on a trophy for the first time as a manager in Scotland. And everybody's an uproar. It's not just Celtic fans that expect Celtic to go and smash it out of the park. The media expect it. Fans of other clubs expect it. They're the first to jump at it when Celtic don't win a treble or they lose a game or anything. So I don't even think it's just Celtic fans or the Celtic players. Everybody expects Celtic to go out and dominate every season. When there's that expectation there to go out and dominate, the team has to go out and back it up. And they have done year upon year upon year. I'm not lucky enough, like Patrick is, to get a ticket for the weekend. I'm sure I've made a couple of people in the comments jealous. But I was holding out, maybe get a wee complimentary one from Bonnerig through the SFA and that sort of stuff. But there's a bit too many Celtic fans in the playing squad, so they get the priority over the Twitter boy. So I didn't get a ticket that way.
Prawn Sandwich Brigade, Patrick. What have we done here? What have we created? What have we created? And the thing as well that I've seen a lot of from a certain group is that they try and say that Celtic have become the establishment club that we so despise. I think that's nonsense because being an establishment club doesn't just come with success, Patrick. It comes with being part of an establishment that rule the roost. And what I mean by that is obviously the running of the game, the officiating of the game. It's the whole package. Celtic have got here through grit, determination, and Kasper Schmeichel spoke about it. We've worked harder. Now, people don't like hearing that, Patrick, because they're saying, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's just because you've got more money. No, we've worked hard to get the money in the first instance. We've then spent the money and worked harder than anybody else to attain success, and then continue with that success. So I don't buy into it at all, Patrick. I think it comes down to hard work. It comes down to having a good strategy. I mean, we've seen this summer and last summer. Potentially, people say that our biggest rivals are Rangers, and obviously they have come second again this season. But look at the business they've done. Look at the millions that they've lost on certain individual players. Even Hadji is released this summer. That's the end of his contract. They make no money. They lose millions of pounds. We don't do that. We make money on the recruitment. The one thing that I am critical of the club around, the main thing is the youth development. I don't think we're bringing enough youth players through. That's an issue that's a much bigger issue that needs to be addressed. But we're here through merit, and we're here on merit, Patrick. I don't think Celtic gets the credit that the club deserves for that.
No, absolutely not. And the point about money, I think, is where a lot of people try and attack the club and say, well, you've just got the most money and you spend the most money, and that's the big correlation of your success. And that is a big correlation to success. The more you spend, the more likely you are to succeed. It's not a direct causation, as we've seen with teams like Manchester United. I mean, you could spend hundreds of millions and win nothing. But as you say, we've worked hard for the success that we've got. I mean, we started 1887 with nothing. We were a charity. Other poor Irish families within the East End of Glasgow. So we've worked hard for the position that we're in, and obviously modern day Celtic, it all sort of stems from 1994. Fergus McCann, I think Fergus was worth about 12 million, and he put 5 million of his own cash into the club. That's a man who went to Canada and worked hard in an industry that he knew a lot about and made a lot of money in, and he was willing to risk half of his personal fortune to save the club. You look at guys like Dermot Desmond, who have went out and succeeded in their sort of professional lives, and then went in and helped Celtic become a success over the last 30 years. You could go through various different types of people that have been involved in the club over the years, but I think those two are the sort of main sort of boardroom level that have really changed the landscape of Scottish football for Celtic in the last 30 years. And obviously, you referenced Kasper Schmeichel there. I don't doubt that Philip Clement's training was pretty intense some days, but obviously he doesn't have the brains of Brendan Rodgers, and the players do not have the skills that the Celtic squad have. And Kasper's right. We've worked the hardest. We have the best players. We've got the best manager, and everything we have won, we have earned. And I suppose in a way we are the establishment club in terms of winning. We definitely win more than others and have done since, Jock Stein walked in 1965. But in terms of, being favoured by those running the game and being favoured by refereeing decisions, particularly while Crawford Allen was at the helm, that's not Celtic. That would be a different club that would be viewed as the establishment club. So, we're the most successful by, 2 trophies now. And the league is wrapped up, hopefully 3 by the end of the weekend. But I would agree with yourself. I don't think we are the establishment club. And, we have had to work really hard to get into the position that we're all lucky enough to be in right now.
It's not just about... Sorry, on you go, James.
But it's not this. There's a difference between being an establishment club and being the dominant club. Celtic are the dominant club. And it goes back to what Patrick's saying about the hard work that has gone on and off the field. Celtic get 40 million a season from the Champions League because we work hard throughout the season to win the league to ensure that we qualify. It comes through the work from the players in the park. You don't stumble upon buying a Matt O'Reilly for 1.5 million and then sell him for 25 million. That doesn't just appear. That is strategy, that is long-term thinking, that is hard work on the training pitch and then on the pitch when it comes to the games as a result. It's years and years of consistency and hard work from the club that is often brushed aside, and people see it as a guarantee that Celtic are going to win the league every season, but it's not. It's never a guarantee, as we've seen in some years gone by. But the consistency of this team, the togetherness, all working towards the same goal of making the club bigger and better every single season has led to this dominance.
No, you're right. And you're talking about consistency. Like I've often said, we never phone it in. Celtic are constantly there, turning up. And when the standards do drop over a campaign or even over 90 minutes, you've got this demanding fan base. And that's why I don't have an issue with having a demanding fan base. People say, you lose 1-2 and you're throwing sharks at players and buses and stuff. That's nonsense. That's just a one-off moment that was in the midst of a pandemic where everybody was locked up and going stir crazy and everybody had cabin fever. We shouldn't even have been up at the stadium. So that's just one moment. I don't have an issue with having really, really high demands of the players, the manager and the football club. And that's why we constantly question what goes on. But I want to start today's discussion around the man who's on the tagline, around the man who's on the thumbnail today, and that's Brendan Rodgers. And here's a man who come back to the football club, Patrick, and we all had our own opinions on the way he left first time round. I maintain what I said at the very offset of his second tenure. He's the best gaffer we could have got in the door. He is the best manager Celtic could have appointed at that time. And actually, we didn't have too much wiggle room. For example, we're going for 9 in a row last time round, and we actually were able to bring in something of a left field appointment in Ronnie Dyler during that 9 years. We really couldn't do that after Andrew because, you had built a style of football, an entertaining side, a side that had won a double, then a treble, and we had to build on it, Patrick. And for me at that time, there were very, very few managers out there who could have taken Angie's team and done what Brendan's done with it. Yes, there was a transitional period. First half of the season wasn't that great, actually. There was a moment after the Hearts game where they beat us at Celtic Park. And I remember after the game thinking, we're not going to win this league. This actually is going to happen. We're going to lose this. So I thought Brendan Rodgers did tremendously. He was on a short leash in that first season, Patrick. I don't think those doubters are still among us. They're certainly not very vocal, are they? He's won a lot of people. I'm not going to say everybody, but he's won, I think, the majority of Celtic fans back over. Would you agree with that?
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think so. I think you'd have to be pretty stubborn in your views if you weren't sort of fully behind the manager and think he's the best person for the job at this moment. I agree. Back 2 summers ago when we appointed him, I think he was the obvious candidate for the job. When you make these appointments or when you go and sign a player, it's always a risk in terms of the money that you're putting out there to try and sign some sort of version of what you want. Managerial appointments, particularly at Celtic, where we put so much trust in one person in that job. It's such a risk, these appointments, it's such a risk. And obviously the immediate advantage with Brendan is you know exactly what you're getting, positives and negatives, and there are, a handful of negatives, that vastly outweighed by the positives, but there are some. Whereas you didn't know what you're getting if you appointed a new guy or someone who, isn't used to Scottish or British football. And obviously, his brand of football isn't that dissimilar to Angie's. He'd been at the club recently, he had great success, he wanted to come back. He knows Dermot, and we know how involved Dermot is after all of Brendan's comments in the last few weeks. So I think he was definitely the right man for the job, and I think what he's done this season, I mean, it's maybe not been as fast-paced and exciting as Ange Ball was at times, but I think this season has been an absolutely incredible achievement. Possibly the most impressive season I have seen as a season ticket holder, because I thought the European campaign, it's by far and away the best European campaign I've ever seen, without a shadow of a doubt. We've competed at the Champions League, we've got 12 points, we've moved into the next stage, and we've lost out to Bayern Munich in the very last minute away to the Allianz. I mean, an absolutely fantastic campaign, and now we are 1 game away from the treble. We are 1-3 with most bookies to win the game, so we've got a pretty good chance of winning. So it's a fantastic achievement, and as you say, last season he was on a short leash. There was a lot of people opposed when he first came in. And I remember Joe Hart saying after he retired, they said from the start of the season up until about February, Rodgers didn't actually try and change that much. He tried to sort of run with the old system, and then from February sort of implemented his own ideas. And from February, that is when we really kicked on. It's when Joe Hart kicked on because he announced his retirement and he was determined to win that league. And to be fair, from about February last year, we have been pretty much unstoppable. I know our derby record sort of faltered a wee bit there, but we have been an unbelievable footballing juggernaut since then. And it really is thanks to Brendan, to the players that he's brought in. To be fair, we have gone out and spent the money. So credit goes to the boardroom as well the last 2 years. But I've got no doubt he was the right man for the job. He is the right man for the job going forward. I truly believe he'll stay for at least another year, and I hope he signs an extension and he's here for another sort of 2-3 years, because managers don't tend to get a third spell. So Brendan was brilliant in his first, he's been brilliant in his second. I can't see there being a third, so I just hope it lasts a wee bit longer than the 12 months he's got left in his contract.
An unstoppable juggernaut, James. There you go. That's a headline for Monday morning, I hope. I hope that's the headline for Monday morning, Patrick. James, again, going back to this season, and it's interesting because obviously we've enjoyed an invincible treble under Brendan. It's interesting when Patrick says that in terms of his Celtic support in life, this is the more satisfying season, and that's down to the European endeavours, of course, because as I said at the top of the show, we very much are a demanding fan base, and one of the demands is that we restore some kind of pride in the European competition. I think we did that this season, didn't we?
Yeah, that was really the only stone that Brendan Rodgers had left unturned from his first spell at the club. I was there with Acsom at his first press conference, and that was the main question I asked him, was about European progress, how are you feeling towards that? And that is it was one of his big aims with coming back to Celtic, because they can't shy away from it. Our European record under Brendan the first time around was absolutely dreadful. We were getting hammered off of absolutely everybody. Teams were hoping and praying to have Celtic in their Champions League draw. And I think after the season that we've just had in Europe, teams aren't going to be having the same mindset. I can't think back to a campaign where I was as hopeful for Celtic games in Europe as I was that one just there. Maybe the one where Lennon topped the Europa League, but then again, that is the Europa League. This is the Premier competition. But we're talking about Brendan's future. He says it's up to the club. I think he seems to be really enjoying his time in Glasgow. Maybe his first season where there was the question marks. Fans were still a bit unsure of Brendan. He might not have been enjoying it then, but he's firmly back in the good books now with the Celtic support. I think we do get another season out of him. Beyond that, it depends how the contract situation goes. Maybe Andrew will come back. That's something that I've seen murmurs where that's a discussion for another day. But if we're going to keep the revolving door going, we can just bring Ange back. But given the whirlwind that surrounded his return to the club, it was a bumpy start. We got dumped out of the cup early. First and only trophy, as I mentioned earlier, that he's missed out in his time managing Scotland. The alarm bells might have been ringing, and for the media and for the other fans, they were thinking, Brendan's come back. He's talked about, I'll see you here in May, and then we're faltering, we're stumbling away to this title. I don't even think Celtic fans were confident we were going to win that league until about maybe March time, where we win that derby. That's probably where it stands out to me that we were going to win league that season. But Brendan, he drowned out the noise. He focused on his team and their story rather than the chatter elsewhere. And when it comes to the end of the season, he got the last laugh, as he always does when he's managing in Scotland. And as he mentioned, I think the football has been enjoyable this season compared to the first season, especially. The progress in Europe has me hopeful for what the future can hold with Brendan Rodgers. It feels like he's really bringing this team forward. And I think there's more levels for this team to go to as well, especially in the Champions League. But another thing that gives me a bit of encouragement with that is the transfer approach. When you look at the transfer window that he had when he came back to Celtic that first season, it was absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. I don't think there's a single player that we signed there that is still at the club making an impact now. Maybe Paulo Bernardo, but he was only on loan at that point. So there was a massive pressure on the club to go out last summer and really hit the ball at the park. And they upped the budget. They were spending more money on players. And I hope that's something we carry over into this summer. I don't think Brendan is going to let the standards fall again when it comes to recruitment. We've been calling for a change in approach for years, and hopefully that can continue. I think some of the players he's brought in, Schmeichel, Engels, Ida, they've been positive additions to the team. Kasper Schmeichel especially. I wasn't too sure, I will admit, I wasn't too sure when we brought in Kasper Schmeichel. I didn't think it was the right goalkeeper, but I thought the same with Joe Hart, and they've well and truly shut me up there. So I was happy with the players he brought in. But what impressed me the most with Brendan was what he did with the players that were already here. Your Ange Postecoglou players. What he did with Matt O'Reilly in that first season was nothing short of absolutely exceptional. And we knew Matt O'Reilly was a promising player. We knew the talent was there, but we just had to see a bit more evidence of it. And he went out that season and he blew our minds. And I think it was the same with Dyson Maeda. There was clearly a quality player there, but there was a lot of negatives to his game as well. As I'd mentioned, he seemed like a bit of a headless chicken at times, but everything he's done this season has been focused. There's intent to every movement he does, and he's become an absolute machine for Celtic this season, the best player in Scotland. So there's encouraging signs for going forward with Brendan, the players he brings in, the players that are already at the club, and I'm really hopeful for what the future can hold under Brendan.
Some great points here, James, and you're right. Matt O'Reilly's development under Brendan was sensational, and I think both of the men have spoken about that. Dyson Maeda, let's not forget, he still divided opinion until Brendan Rodgers came to the football club. Look at him now. Unbelievable. Liam Scales, in terms of a player who was already there and he's turned him into a player who, when I ask you who we're going to be lining up as a starting 11 at the weekend, many of us will say Liam Scales. I certainly will. He's a first choice, even though we've signed a £6 million replacement, so-called. And then you look at some of the other guys that I kind of tipped at that time. James, the reason you were disappointed with Schmeichel is because you'd done a blog on about 24 other goalkeepers before we signed Schmeichel. And there was one or two in there I think you quite fancied. But the players I was looking forward to seeing under Brendan, where it's not really worked out, the first one was Lilo Bada. I thought Lilo Bada was a player that Brendan would really have developed. Unfortunately, we all know what happened there. And Hatate, we just got a wee glimpse of that, I think, coming into the kind of last few months of the season. The Hatate that Brendan could work with, and of course he's been injured. But I think it's a great point. He has developed players, Patrick, to a point where he's taken up to that next level. Sometimes it's a manager that does that with a player, isn't it? And I think Rodgers has done it with quite a few.
I think he has. Maeda is obviously the standout. For the guy to have played with Ange, I think for 18 months or 2 years at Yokohama, to have then played under him for 18 months at Celtic, and then for Brendan to have gotten the best out of him is pretty, ironic, if you want to call it that. We were always playing him on the left or the right, and Japan were playing him through the middle, and we sort of questioned that. And then, of course, Brendan plays him through the middle, and he becomes one of the best strikers in Europe. Who knew that the Japan manager knew what he was doing after all? Hatate is an unfortunate one in a way, because I think there's always been a question mark about, is this the summer that he leaves? And, maybe this is the summer that he leaves, but the last month or two, he's been absolutely brilliant. He's been a fantastic player. He's been a fantastic player for Celtic. I think that second Ange season, he was just unplayable at times. And, I think we've really seen him get back to that in this last month or two. If he does move on, it would be a shame. Maybe his injury could be a blessing in disguise, where a team doesn't want to pay our price tag for an injured player, and he might stick around. But I think Alistair Johnson as well. Alistair Johnson he's had his struggles at certain points this season and last season, but and he obviously only played 6 months under Ange. But I think he's been a brilliant servant to Celtic this last 2.5 years, and I was lucky enough to join Jim Orr at that sort of fan media sort of moment that they had after the game on Trophy Day. And
rubbing shoulders, James, rubbing shoulders with the stars. Jim Orr, Alistair Johnston, Kasper was there, wasn't he? Kasper Schmeichel.
He was, and Luke McCowan as well was the third one. But Alistair Johnson sounded quite excited for next season. I don't think he's got any thoughts at all about moving on. That's what I took from that anyway. So it is interesting to see all these players that Brendan has developed. I think Kasper. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why James didn't rate Kasper, to be honest. Maybe it's the 25 goalkeepers he was looking at before Kasper came in. But I sat down and watched the Germany-Denmark game at the Euros, and Germany sort of huffed and puffed, and I thought they're maybe not going to win it in home soil, and obviously they didn't. But they were. I think Denmark went down to 10 men, and Kasper Schmeichel had pulled off about 4 one-on-one saves. And so we were linked with him 2 weeks later. I think he'd signed 3 weeks later. And I was absolutely over the moon, because you could see, obviously, I think he'd went to Belgium for a year and he wasn't really in the public eye in the UK. But I mean, just that game, I know it's anecdotal evidence, but I thought he was a brilliant goalkeeper. We've seen this season that with the ball at his feet, he's an improvement on Joe Hart, even though he's even older. So there's been quite a few players that have improved under Brendan. I think maybe Carter Vickers is one. He's been plagued by injuries since Brendan came in, and we've maybe not seen the best of him yet. Jota obviously came into the side for sort of 2 months there before being injured. Hopefully we'll see the best of him after the new year, by the looks of things. But in terms of tactical tweaks and the way that we've deployed ourselves in Europe, even going back to last season, I was hyping up this season there, but last season, we're a few seconds away from a draw against Lazio. We get the draw against Atletico Madrid. We finally get that win against Feyenoord, and then you go into this season and we're unbeaten at home, getting a good few wins. And you fall slightly short against Bayern Munich 2-1. We didn't pick up Harry Kane at the back post. We'll maybe learn from that. But you can't have any complaints losing 2-1 to Bayern Munich. So a really, really impressive European record in the past 2 years, and long may it continue. One thing on Hatate, I know he's been playing well, but I thought he was a big miss at the weekend, and I'm hoping he isn't that big a miss this weekend, because I think we need to play a lot slicker and a lot faster in the cup final if we're to sort of go out and win quite comfortably. Because at the weekend there, that was touch and go, and I think Hatate was probably the reason for that.
The big thing as well that I think has to be commented on, this is not with hindsight as to after what happened to Hatate. We've been saying it all season. Aberdeen are a dirty team. There's no other way I can describe it. I think they're a dirty side. I think Shinnie's a player that always seems to get a bit of leeway. He gets 4 or 5 fills before he gets a booking, if indeed he gets a booking at all. And I think that who's the other guy? He wasn't actually playing against us in the last game.
Nielsen.
Yes, Nielsen. Dirty player, Norwegian. Nielsen, and of course, we've seen what happened to Hatate. So I'm a wee bit concerned about that as well, I've got to say, because I think Aberdeen have been guilty of that this season, and it's maybe a tactic to pacify Celtic. St Mirren are not a great team to watch, but I'll tell you something, Stephen Robinson knows how to play against Celtic. And he was the same. He made it difficult when he was a Motherwell manager as well. Aberdeen are a different side, but that is definitely an area of their game that I'm not keen on, and that is where they try and pacify you by hurting your players. Here's an interesting one, right? There's a lot of people talking about someone you've already mentioned, James, and that's Ange Postecoglou. If you're like some of our contributors, Lawrence, he doesn't like talking about ex-Celts, that's fair enough. I think it's an incredible achievement that an ex-Celtic manager's in a European final tonight, and even JP, who was born into supporting Man United, he was born in Manchester, as his English club, of course, would rather see Ange winning the trophy tonight. So that's interesting as well. And it made me start thinking to myself, how many Celtic managers, guys, have won a European trophy as a manager, right? So obviously there's Jock's team that we know of, and I'm looking through it, and I'm wondering, has there been any others? This is a very interesting question, actually. So Dalglish obviously won European trophies as a player, as did Martin O'Neill, as did Wim Janssen, but not as manager. Now, did Joseph Venglos win a European trophy? I'm not sure. I'm going to have to check that, actually, because he was a very successful manager. Did he win a European trophy, though? That's a big question, and the answer is no, he didn't. So perhaps, possibly, Ange Postecoglou could become the only second man to do that. Ex-manager of Celtic, who has gone on to win a European trophy as a manager. I've looked through the rest of them. No, none of them have done it. That's an interesting stat, isn't it? I know you're a football aficionado away from Celtic as well, James. A wee bit on Ange. I'd love to see the big fella winning it tonight. I would. I mean, look, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But as I've just said there, this doesn't happen very often. It's only ever happened once in the history of Celtic that a Celtic manager has won a European trophy as a manager, and thankfully Jock did it with us. Ange could do it with Spurs tonight.
No, I hope he does. He left Celtic in a fantastic place when he left to go join Spurs. I've never been a big fan of having some sort of bitterness or a hatred for a player or a manager that leaves and goes elsewhere, unless they leave in a bad way or they've left the club worse off by departing. I always want them to go on and do well. I want O'Reilly to do well down at Brighton. I want Hugo to do well over in France. He's not doing the best at the moment, but I hope he does well in the future. And I want Ange to do good as well. I've been following Spurs closely since they went down, and it's been hard to watch how poor they've been this season. And it comes to a lot of the alarm bells that we had around Ange, especially in Europe, when you're playing better teams that can cut right through you. He can get away with playing the style of football he played when he was at Celtic, because a St Johnstone isn't going to slice you open like a Premier League team will. Every team in the Premier League has fast-paced attackers who can cut inside. They're all clinical finishers. They are going to punish you, and we've seen that at Spurs this season. But Ange gave us some memorable times, memorable moments as fans, playing some of the most entertaining football that you're likely to see at Celtic, a swashbuckling style. And he embraced the club, and we embraced him as a result. And we can't underestimate the turnaround that he had at Celtic. This period of dominance, he has had a massive part to play in that as well, because we were a laughingstock when he came into Celtic. We were the punching bag of Scottish football. We had an absolutely terrible season. And every narrative was pointing towards the pendulum has swung now. The pendulum's in Rangers' favour. How can they carry on from a season where they didn't lose a single game in the league, and Celtic were absolutely dreadful? And Ange had to come in where he was a complete unknown and pick that team up and carry it forward. And the media was already counting him out. It was Postecoglou. Who was this? We all remember that Alan Brazil video. So he's got the pressure on him already. The results aren't going his way the first month, and look at the turnaround. And then the season that followed that. The job that Ange did at Celtic was absolutely fantastic. They left us in a brilliant place for Brendan to take over as well. And whilst he was only here for 2 seasons, I think he had a massive part to play in Celtic's dominance, shifting the pendulum back our way immediately after Rangers stopped the 10, because things were looking bleak. Things were looking pretty doom and gloom at that point. We didn't have anything to kind of lean on or hope for. And Ange came in and gave us something to hope for. And I hope it's the most important match of his career tonight. And I wish him all the best. We know how Spurs are with trophies. I don't know when the last trophy they won is, but they are perennial bottle jobs. I remember the Champions League final they played against Liverpool, where I think it might be the worst Champions League final I've ever seen as far as quality goes. It was an absolutely terrible game. Hopefully Spurs can play better than that. Man United aren't a good team. They are better than Spurs at the moment, but I hope for Ange's sake he can go out and get the job done, because he's given us some great times. I think we have got to support him.
And some great players. This is a big thing as well. When you look at how much we have enjoyed the experience of Kyogo Furuhashi, Ryo Atati, and who's the other one? Daijin Maeda. These guys are iconic. They're iconic players, and they were handpicked by Ange Postecoglou. Handpicked. I made the observation last week that he signed Matt O'Reilly. What was it? 1.3 million quid, something like that. We sell him for 26 with add-ons. We brought in Jota for 6. We sell him for 25. The other 2 guys that we made £10 million on, Abada and Kyogo, there's 70 million quid, guys, on 4 players that Ange brought to the football club. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And if you were to sell the other 2 players that he brought in from the J League, and I don't want it to happen, then you're over £100 million. That's unbelievable. And that is the legacy, James, like you're talking about there. That's the legacy that the manager left us with. And I know that information came out about, the timing of it, and maybe he was doing this and that and making approaches for players elsewhere. For Spurs, yeah, that's no great. That's no great. But you know what? He stayed to the end of the season. He finished the job. He got the treble over the line, and then he left. And stranger things have happened. I don't want to think post-Brendan at the moment, James. I don't want to go that far. Stranger things have happened. I've been watching these interviews. And I do remember going into that Scottish Cup final against Inverness Cali Thistle, Patrick, where he wasn't even that cryptic. He just avoided the subject of whether or not he would be at Celtic Park the following season. He just completely avoided it. And he was like, just let me, for himself, let me just do what I want to do for myself, kind of thing. And looking back, he was basically saying, no, I'm not going to be here. I'm selfish. I'm going to follow my own path. And that's football, though. That's modern football, Patrick. That's what these guys do. He had a dream when he was a kid, probably to manage Liverpool. He was a Liverpool fan, growing up in Australia. He had a dream to manage an English football. He has seen Celtic as a stepping stone. Absolutely, he has. And that's exactly what he's done. But look what he left us with. 5 trophies out of 6. And these guys that I've just mentioned, and the other ones who are still starring for Celtic. So I don't bear any grudge for Ange Postecoglou. What's your thoughts? Will you watch the game tonight, Patrick?
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll be cheering them on. I've got no great love for Spurs. If anything, I find them quite irritating, quite pathetic is actually probably the word I would use as a club. The constant bottle job sort of nature of it, and the refusal of a winning mentality. I mean, we were talking about not only the team having a winning mentality, but fans having a winning mentality at Celtic. I think Spurs are the complete opposite of that. And Ange has tried to sort of go from Celtic to Spurs and install that, within the culture of the club. And he's been quite shocked at what he's seen, because it's almost impossible to install it at a club like Spurs. So I will not be supporting Spurs per se, but I do want Ange to win the trophy. I've got no great love for Man United either, to be perfectly honest. I've never supported an English team in a European Cup final, but I would like to see the big man win a trophy. It's an interesting stat that you brought up about Celtic managers winning European trophies. I couldn't think of one, and obviously there isn't another one outside a big jock. So that would be an interesting category for Ange to put himself in. One of two. So I wish him all the best. Whether he comes back, I mean, a lot of it is about timing, isn't it? I mean, we've seen that with Brendan. I mean, he gets sacked sort of early April from Leicester. He turns up at that cup semi-final, 1-0 against Rangers at the end of April, wanting to take a year out of football. 5 weeks later,
he threw a cat amongst the pigeons that day, Patrick, didn't he?
He really
knew
did.
What he was
really
doing.
Did.
He knew what he was doing.
5 weeks later, Michael Nicholson's not watching the Champions League finals away in Mallorca or Menorca, talking to Brendan at his house. And then I think McGregor and I think Dermot as well sort of sealed the deal, and he came back. So, I'd like to think that, I'm pretty sure Brendan will be here till the end of next season. I'd like to think he'll maybe be here, a year or two after that. I was at the Scottish Football Writers Awards on Sunday night with Declan, and when he went up to collect his trophy, Brendan, that is, not Declan.
Well,
he
you
said,
never know. You never know, eh? I mean, it is Declan.
You never know. Aye. He went up and he said, he made a few points. One of them about Dermot Desmond and how crucial he is to not only him coming back, but the success of Celtic. So he's really pushed that the last few weeks. And not only that, him and his wife call Scotland home. They obviously get married, I think, up in the Highlands a few weeks after that cup final against Aberdeen in the Invincible season. So they obviously consider Glasgow and Scotland home, and hopefully he is happy here. He's always said he's happy here, so I'd like to think he'll stay for a wee while longer. Maybe Ange. I think I've seen one or two rumours about the Bundesliga, and I think that might suit him well. And then maybe after Brendan leaves and Ange has a bit of success in Germany, maybe he could come back for one of his final jobs in management. That would be quite nice, because I do like. I love the brand of football he plays. I think he's a great guy. I think he's maybe been caught out once or twice in the media down in England. He's clearly been frustrated, and he's maybe been a bit unfair to the post-match interview, which I think is unfortunate. But I mean, I'd be ripping my hair out if I was the Spurs manager. The expectation on you and the lack of help that you get on top of all the injuries. It's an impossible job, and he's done his best. So good luck to him, and I would like to see him back at Celtic one day. I don't know if it will happen, but one thing, just a slight sort of side note to that, I thought it was quite interesting at Newcastle that we went out and basically asked Newcastle for a friendly. And obviously Eddie Howe's their manager, and he's been there for quite a while now. So I don't know, maybe in 12 months' time, could that be a connection? I'm just putting it out there. I don't know anything, but I thought that was an interesting choice from the club to ask Newcastle for a friendly, because obviously Brendan went to that cup semi. We're inviting Eddie up to Glasgow. I'm sure he'll have a chat with Brendan, have a chat with the Celtic board. I think that could be a potential link in 12 or 24 months' time.
He's chucking grenades, James. He's chucking grenades.
A wee nice thing on Ange just before we move on. Surely you've seen the quote that he put out, maybe it was around November time when they still had the League Cup run underway, where he says, "I always win things in my second season, mate." That quote has been getting brought up the last sort of month or so frantically. How cool will Ange look if he can win that trophy and then away goes out the door, and he's got that quote to hang on with it? But as Paddy was saying, we have seen a different side to him. But have you seen the questions he's getting asked by these journalists and these reporters? No wonder he's getting annoyed or frustrated. They're basically, it sounds like they're bullying him with some of these questions. It doesn't sound fair, a lot of it. There was the one today where there was a journalist who had written an article about if Ange wins, he'll be a hero. If he loses, he'll be seen as a clown. And Ange pulled up the journalist in that press conference. The journalist didn't ask him about that article, but Ange went, "You're not calling me a clown. I've worked hard to get to this stage. I've won trophies everywhere I've gone, to build up my career to get to this point where I can be the first Aussie and the first Greek to lead out a side for a European final. And I've got people treating me like this." I think some of the treatment he's had down south has been incredibly unfair, and I hope he can take a trophy at Spurs and then walk out the door with it.
The other thing as well, James, is for aspiring journalists like yourself, I think the key with Ange would be, what's your second question? Because he tends to bat the first one back at you, doesn't he? And I know that Amy Canavan has had the pleasure of a 1-to-1 with Ange Postecoglou. I thought she'd done brilliantly, but he has got a certain approach. But I agree with you. I do think that they've gone in studs up because they're actually looking for a reaction so that they get the clicks and they get the traction and all this kind of stuff, the impressions. The one thing I love, and this is a blogger's dream actually, so Liam Carrigan, if you're listening in, I love the fact that there's a Puskas connection between Jockstein and Ange. So after tonight, Ange he may well be the second Celtic manager to win a European trophy as a manager at Celtic or elsewhere. He may fall into that category. And then there's the whole Puskas thing. So as we know, Celtic win the double, and as a result of that, the board decided to take the playing staff to the 1954 World Cup finals. Some of the Celtic players were playing, Neely Mockin being one of them, and Jockstein sat and was mesmerised by this great Hungarian side, which of course included Ferenc Puskás. And the style of football could actually be, traced right back to that great Hungarian side from the 1950s. He watched the victory that Hungary had against England. He had a tape of it. He watched it over and over and over again. For him, that was the pinnacle of football. And then fast forward, you've got an older Ferenc Puskás who had actually taken Panathinaikos to the European Cup final as a manager. He ends up going over to Australia and managing none other than Ange Postecoglou. And then there was this kind of philosophy about the way that football should be played. So Jockstein looked at it and monitored it and observed it, tried to replicate it, and so's Ange. And both those men could be just the only two men to win a European trophy, having managed Celtic. So there you go. There's a wee blog. Open goal for you, Liam. Barry O'Sullivan. Got to bring in some comments now. Barry O'Sullivan was in Seville. Today, of course, is the anniversary of Seville 2003. If you were in Seville for the final, regardless if you were in the stadium or not, what were your memories? Let us know in the comment section. And let us know, will we ever see a European final again? Let us know in the comment section. 1979, on this day, 10 men won the league. Going further back, gentlemen, sorry. I know neither of you two guys were there. Maybe your dads were. 10 men won the league. One of the most famous nights in Celtic's history. And if you go further back, 1971, Marvin Gaye released What's Going On, which was an incredibly powerful response to the social and political turmoil of the 1960s. And all these years later, listen to the lyrics. They're as relevant today as they were in 1971. Barry O'Sullivan, I was in Seville. What an experience. I've never watched the game back. I'll tell you something, right? I have had the pleasure and privilege of speaking to a lot of the people who were involved in that team, from Martin O'Neill to Chris Sutton, John Hartson. Everybody I've spoken to, not one of them has watched the game back. Not sure I ever will. Can still see Henrik raise for his goals. Maybe we'll cover it during the pre-season, Barry, when there's not much happening. Maybe we'll do a watch-along. Would you come and watch it with us, Barry? Here we go. Jungle Lion, you're in. Big Ange missed a trick last night not doing the Joe Pesci scene from Goodfellas where he was talking about being a clown. What am I, a clown? Do I amuse you? Yeah, absolutely. In an Australian accent, please, Jungle Lion. Let's type that into AI. I'm pretty sure they can come up with something. Paul McLean. Yeah, be rooting for Ange tonight. Me as well, Paul. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. And Davy Scott. Remember, it's 10 men won the league day. Absolutely. I was 16 years old in the jungle. Saw us go 1-0 down and a man down, Johnny Doyle, of course. We came back to win 4-2. I was that drunk I missed school the next day. Brilliant. I was so drunk. Has anybody been so drunk that they missed school the next day? And I'm talking secondary school here, not primary. Interesting enough, Johnny Doyle, James, I'm not going to ask you a second time. Johnny Doyle obviously was sent off that day, the late, great Johnny Doyle. And the Jimmy Johnson song, which has now been adopted as a Jamesy Forrest song, it was pointed out to me Celtic fans used to also sing Johnny Doyle on the wing. So that's fantastic to hear as well. We need to talk about the final, guys. Taken absolutely none for granted. We've spoken about the impact of Brendan and, of course, Jamesy Forrest and the impact that he has made as the most decorated Celt of all time. That's just bizarre. And I know that it's just numbers because a League Cup doesn't equate to a European Cup. So Bobby Lennox, for me, is still the most successful individual, but the most decorated player. The big question, Patrick, does he start at the weekend?
I think he does, yeah. I've not been impressed with Kuhn of recent weeks, so I would play Forrest. You know, there's actually it is quite difficult, that front three. I mean, I think the midfield three. Sorry to Luke McCowan, but I think the midfield three picks itself. I think it's McGregor, Engels, and Bernardo. I think the back four. I mean, there's some questions. Carter Vickers has came back in, but I thought he was a bit poor at the weekend. But I mean, the front three is a difficult one because I would like to see Maeda play through the middle. I just think we'll lose something with Ida through the middle and Maeda on the left. When Jota comes back from injury, it gives you different options. But while he's out, I think we do have a bit of a conundrum. So, I've not been that impressed with Kuhn, so I think I probably would go with Maeda left, Ida through the middle, Forrest on the right. I think that might be our best team at the moment. Forrest, obviously, 33. I think he turns 34 in July. He's got a year left. Brilliant servant. 16 years scoring record. Hopefully can keep it up next season. But, the last 2 seasons, he's came in last part of the season and he's contributed a lot. He's been brilliant the last few weeks and he was brilliant in the last part of last season. So I think he's got his place. I would start him. I've been very reluctant to call my Celtic legend down the years, but you've got to call him a legend if he's won more trophies than any other player. Now, you can talk about him being fortunate to be at the club at certain points in his career. He's maybe not been near the first team, but basically since Brendan came in 2016, he has been, either our best winger or pretty close to being our best winger the last 8-9 seasons. So, I mean, his place in Celtic's history is cemented. I'm a firm believer that Callum McGregor will overtake him in about 2 or 3 years' time. But for now, he is our most decorated player, and I think he should start at the weekend. And you make a good point. I'd actually forgotten how dirty a team Aberdeen were. I remember that. Is he Norwegian, that midfielder? I remember watching the last time they came to Celtic Park. I couldn't believe how he stayed on the park. I mean, 6 or 7 really bad fouls. So I think we've just got to nip it in the bud really early. I think we've just got to go 2-0 up as quickly as possible and then just toy with them. That's how I would like to see the game go. But, you don't want to take anything for granted. Aberdeen have caused us problems at Hampden the past 2 years. So I just want to go out and win the game. I'd be quite happy going out to win the game. But, if there was a perfect scenario, just take a sort of early 2-0 lead and just see the game out.
There's quite a lot in that to unpack, Patrick, because I don't think it's as easy as you might expect with regards to the starting 11. You think about James Forrest and the way that he completely dismantled Shinnie in the last game at Postecoglou, where we win 5-1 and Hatate gets injured. He ran riot against Shinnie, right? And Shinnie's going to start for Aberdeen, obviously. So I think about that, and I think about the fact that, okay, he's more direct. He doesn't mind taking on Shinnie. He'll go outside as well as inside. We know that Kuhn favours coming inside, kind of like using that to try and get that wee bit and then swinging the ball in, often for a shot himself. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider that I totally agree with you on is Maeda through the middle is far more effective than Maeda down the left. So you've got that to consider. Kuhn has gone off the boil. If Maeda plays through the middle, the best replacement for him is Forrest on the left, but I've already put Forrest on the right. So I do think that there's quite a lot of dilemmas. And I also agree with regards to the back line is much easier to choose. The midfield is much easier to choose. I think the big dilemma going into this game, James, is the forward line. Who do you go for?
Yeah, Brendan's got a lot of food for thought when it comes to that front line. Because I thought Ida was really quiet at the weekend. They didn't have as much service, but you can't forget that going into that game, he'd hit a decent wee bit of form. He was getting a couple of goals under his belt. I thought even Maeda had a rare quiet day last weekend, but he's needed next week. Whether it is wide or through the middle, we need Maeda at the top of his game. Even Forrest was fantastic when he came off the bench. What a moment for him. It had to be him to get the equaliser. As you mentioned, he's now our most decorated player. It felt like a real fairy tale moment that as well. It had to be James Forrest right at the end. Does that late goal move him into the team for this weekend? I think you'll need to wait and see, because even if Kuhn's not playing well, even someone like Yang looked quite good off the bench. He injected a bit of life into what seemed like a pretty tired trophy performance from Celtic, in my opinion. So there's lots for Brendan to think about when it comes to picking the team for this weekend. I think you could play Forrest off the left, go Kuhn off the right, and then Maeda through the middle. That would maybe be the team I would go with. I'm still very unsure at the minute. We'll probably hear more from Brendan when it comes to his press conference before the game to get a real gauge of how it's going to go. Aberdeen, they are a tough team to play against at Hampden, but when I look at it, I just want to look at it there. Our record against Aberdeen, as you looked at the head-to-head in the last 4 meetings, it's an aggregate of 17-3 to Celtic. So we've figured out the early season media darlings in Aberdeen pretty quickly, as much as it has coincided with their demise that's come around as well. So I'm feeling very confident heading into it. Our record against Aberdeen speaks for itself. But there is a lot of dilemmas for Brendan to think over. I don't even think Bernardo McCowan is that clear of a choice. I thought Bernardo was okay when he played at the weekend. You get guarantees with Paulo Bernardo. You're not going to get a bad performance from him. He's not going to go missing. A game isn't going to pass him by like you might have seen happen to Luke McCowan in the past. I think back to the loss at Easter Road when McCowan started. I thought that game really passed him by. And you don't get that with Paulo Bernardo. So I think maybe the guarantee that he is going to turn up and put in a shift is why you would choose him over McCowan. But when it comes to the forward line, I'm still very unsure. I don't mean to sit in the fence, but I'm going to say I don't know. I don't know. And I'd dread to think how Brendan's feeling mulling that over. He might go with Forrest. Forrest is one of his old favourites. So I wouldn't be surprised if Forrest comes in.
It's an interesting point you make about McCowan, and we were rotten the day in the first half when Rangers beat us 3-2 as well. But I thought McCowan was one of the worst culprits in the first half. He's a player that I thought to myself, you could have hooked him at halftime. But he came onto the game in the second half, I've got to be fair. Right, okay, I'm going to actually say I would start with Jamesy Forrest, and it's not sentimentality. I would start with Jamesy Forrest, but I'd start with him on the left like you suggested. Maeda through the middle, Kuhn on the right, and then I think Kuhn and Forrest can switch. You know, whilst the game's in motion and you're actually gauging it, they can switch left to right. I don't think Kuhn is as effective on the left as Forrest is on the right, but I think the two of them can switch as the game progresses. Where does that leave Ida? I've championed Ida. I've stood up for Ida. I'm not dropping him per se. I just think, like I say, that Jamesy Forrest ran shinny ragged and made us far more effective through the middle. And I think that that's a decent trade-off. And then you've got Ida on the bench, of course, Patrick. Ida's been an impact player from the bench. Probably his lesser effective performances have been when he's been a starter. Can you see Brendan doing that, do you think? Or does Ida start?
I don't think I've ever been so on the fence about a starting 11 in my life. I mean, this front three, I mean, it really could go any way. You could even see Yang come into the game or even start the game. It's interesting what you said there about switching the wingers. I mean, that was obviously a favourite of Neil Lennon's in his 3 month interim spell back in 2019, but I hadn't even considered that as a possibility. Kuhn actually had a pretty clever moment on the left at Trophy Day on Saturday, but I don't think he stayed there that long. I thought when I was sitting pre-match that Brendan was starting his cup final 11 as a sort of test before the sort of week before. But I actually think that Kuhn has been that quiet recently that I think he'll swap Forrest and Kuhn around, and I think you'll see Maeda in the left, Ida in the middle, and then Forrest on the right. And then you still get quite a few options there. I mean, if you're going to make a change, you kind of need to take Ida off, which he's famous for his big game goals. You maybe don't want to do that, but it's the situation you're left with. But you can have Forrest switching. You could have Yang come into the game. You can have Maeda through the middle. You can bring Kuhn on. It does still leave the manager a lot of options. So I think it's going to be the starting 11 from the weekend, but with Forrest coming in for Kuhn for that starting place.
Yeah, some great comments coming through, and I'm going to work through them in the last 5 minutes or so. There were also some brilliant comments on the YouTube after the live yesterday, and I have to bring these up because we were talking yesterday, guys, about being on the Celtic Park pitch for any number of reasons, be it being a pitch invader, right? You don't have to admit that. Playing on there as an ex-player, playing on there as an old codger like me, or maybe even being at a gig. So there was some brilliant there really were some brilliant comments, but I'll tell you what we found out, right? So I used an example of the Peter Grant testimonial that I was at. we played Bayern Munich, as it happens, and the Bayern Munich team had Lothar Matthäus and Jurgen Klinsmann in it. And there's a really good picture on the wiki, both of them wearing Celtic jerseys after the game. Anyway, there was a pitch invader, and he completely bypassed everybody. All the Celtic players bypassed the whole lot of them and went straight to Klinsmann for an autograph, right? And I'll never forget it, because the crowd loved it. It was one of the moments where like, yeah, wee man, get in there, right? And only on Acsom could we find who that pitch invader was, right? Because I actually put it out yesterday. I was like, I wonder who that guy is. They might even watch Acsom. Well, it turns out that they do. So here we go. I'm going to reveal you. I'm sorry. I don't think there's a crime file still outstanding for you. Right. So here we go. Celtic World Order podcast. Big shout out to the guys at the Celtic World Order podcast. If you've not subscribed to them already, then go and subscribe, because the weekend we had Lubo over to do the event in Gracie's. He pipes up in someone's back garden having a barbecue with a few beers. Turns out it was the Celtic World Order podcast. So wee Lubo gets around. So here we go. The wee guy who charged the pitch at Peter Grant's testimonial was none other than our very own Paddy. So Paddy contributes to the Celtic World Order podcast. He felt compelled to say sorry to Granty when we had him on for a chat. He wasn't missing his chance to meet the great Klinsmann. So there you go. Fantastic. It's incredible. And by the way, I would love for you guys at the Celtic World Order to come on and join us on This Is Acsom one Friday night, because we do collaborate. There's a collaboration on Friday night this week where we have Tino from the Celtic Exchange, we have Quinny from Seltzer here, and we also have Ryan from the Celtic the Thunder. So that's our big pre-match. That's our preview for the Scottish Cup on Friday night. If you guys fancy coming along 1 week for that, then I would love to have you on the show as well. There was another one that came up. I was at the U2 gig in 1993, and loads of other viewers were at that gig as well. But James Larkin makes a great point. All this water margin about U2. Bono is a West Brit who champions Israel, also a Protestant unionist from Dublin. Not for me. Well, the Israel comment, absolutely. Yeah, they were pretty cool in 93 though. That was probably the last time they were cool. Not so much now. But yeah, we actually found out who the pitch invader was. So we're going to move on to the Milan pitch invader now, the one that gave the wee clip around the lug to the goalie. If you're watching, please get in touch. We'd love to have you on the show as well. Pitch invaders are us. Right, interesting this morning. I read a report, don't know how much, and you might be able to furnish me with more information on this, James, how much truth is in it, but apparently one of our Champions League opponents is interested in Arne Engels. Did you see that story this morning, James? There's a figure of £20 million being floated, and I've seen in the comments section quite a few people saying, you know what, I'd bite your hand off for that. He has divided opinion, James. What do you make of the story? It seems a bit premature for me to let him go. I think there's a lot of development. We've spoken about what Brendan can do with guys. I think there's a lot of that to come from Arne Engels. Is there truth in the story? I'm not surprised there's interest, if I'm being honest. I think that as a debut season goes, he's pretty much had a good one. A lot of people disagree. Where are you on the Arne Engels debate?
Yeah, it comes from Sport Italia. The language that they used is it's a concrete attempt. That is the quotation that they use, a concrete attempt, which suggests there is something that Atalanta have been in contact with Celtic. He played in Bergamo on match day 3. I think the fact that a team like Atalanta are interested, they're one of the most. They play some of the most free-flowing football in Europe. You can see that by the amount of goals they score season by season. What kind of fee could we look to command? What would the club consider? If we were to double our money for Arne Engels, would you consider it? You could sell Arne Engels, make the quick profit, but I think, as you mentioned, there's still plenty of room for growth in his game, and I think there's room for growth at Celtic. You often find Virgil van Dijk had hit his ceiling for growth at Celtic. I think Matt O'Reilly had hit his ceiling, same with Odsonne Edouard. Those players, it was the right time for them to move on. I don't think that's the case for Arne Engels. I think there's still room for improvement for him at Celtic. I think we could sell him for even more next summer if we wish to. But the transfer news is coming in early. I don't know if you saw. I was surprised you haven't brought it up. I'm going to bring it up as well. Giakoumakis. We're talking about in the summer. I don't know if you've seen this. He's interested in coming back.
I know.
Would you take him?
Right. When I saw it, when I saw it, I scoffed, James. But then a very good point was made yesterday by Ian Conroy. And this all comes into a player that you can learn from. So I know that we're doing the Schmeichel Sinisalo thing, which I think is great. I think Ida, right? This was the point Ian made, and I tend to agree. I think Ida would probably benefit from having an experienced striker at the football club, something that we don't have at the moment. So I can understand it from that. But it's a long shot, Patrick. Talk about putting yourself in the shot window. Would you take the big man, big GG?
Nah, not for me. No, not for me at all. I'd love the song to come back, 99 Red Balloons. I think that'd be brilliant. But no, I mean the guy moves from club to club almost every season. It caused a bit of upset trying to get out of Celtic. I mean, he's quite clearly putting himself in the shop window. I mean, who agrees to do a sit-down interview with a newspaper journalist from another country unless you're purposely trying to get a move? Don't know if you can hear that. Someone's decided to start cutting grass out my window. No, I don't think he offers that much on top of what Ida currently offers. I think he does much better at holding up the ball. He's obviously a younger player. He scores big goals. He's got 20 goals this season. So not for me with Giakoumakis. I don't really see the point in it. I think it would cause more grief than what it would be worth, in my opinion. In terms of Engels, I mean, I think it really does come down to the player and the manager. Because 21 years old, 22 in September, 20 million, so we'd double our money. He could move to Milan. He could play for one of the most exciting teams in Europe. A fairly decent chance at either a European trophy or the Serie A. I can see why it would make sense to both the Celtic board, Atalanta, the player himself. Could we make more after next season? Could we build a team around him? Selling a player after only 1 year, that's pretty uncommon. I wouldn't like to see us do that. I might agree with James. I think there's more to come. So I would like to see him stay. I think it would make sense for us for him to stay and develop. But I could actually see that one happening if it is indeed a concrete offer.
Yeah, it might well happen. And this is the thing. I thought Jota, with the money, we're going about, we can never turn it down. Well, it's not a great deal less than the 25 that was being offered for Jota after the season. I felt that was premature at the time. This has been tremendous. I've really enjoyed it, gents. Thanks very much for your contribution, and thanks everybody for getting involved in the comment section as well. We do read your comments even after the live. We want the Celtic world order. Well, we want Paddy to get back on the Celtic Park pitch with that jersey the next time that we get an invite. Apparently, he's still got the jersey as well. Bring it on to a Celtic State of Mind. Let's collaborate on that. I would love that. I've always wondered what happened to the wee guy, and now we know. So thank you every single one of you for getting involved. If you want to get involved a wee bit more and join us at one of our live events, we are going to be covering the Scottish Cup final live this weekend at Bad. Actually, about 3 or 4 days ago, I was told that there was 330 seats booked. Capacity is around about 400, 450 maybe. So if you want to get a seat, book early, get onto the Bad website, book your seats. It is free. And of course, we have got Alan Stubbs and Tosh McKinley live on Champions League final night at Gracie's. We'll be covering the game, and we'll be doing our usual chat with the 2X Celts as well. Tickets underneath this video. We will be back tomorrow to talk more Scottish Cup final action. Thank you once again to James McKenzie and Patrick McGilt for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.